You're listening to the Exploring Fitness Podcast, Episode 12. Today's episode discusses how the complexities of fitness can be simplified into 100 words. In 3, 2, 1, go. I'm Dan Dalator. In over 10 years of experience as a clinician and a coach, I've worked with hundreds of athletes to help them improve their health, wellness, and fitness, but still feel that there is so much more for all of us to learn. This is a podcast dedicated to furthering our understanding of health, wellness, fitness, and how to apply these concepts into our daily lives to create true and lasting changes in your fitness and health. This is the Exploring Fitness Podcast. Every so often, we read or hear something that really strikes a chord within us. A moving speech from someone clearly passionate about a topic, or a saying that hits us at the right time just when we needed to hear it, and it sticks with us. For me, one of those came from the founder of CrossFit, Greg Glassman's World-Class Fitness in 100 Words. Throughout the quote, he seamlessly moves from the base of CrossFit's theoretical hierarchy of development, nutrition, through the top of the pyramid, sport. He discusses the three main categories of movements as defined by CrossFit: monostructural, gymnastics, and weightlifting, along with other key concepts in CrossFit methodology like variability, mastering mechanics, intensity, and training to rest days. There is a saying that beginners complicate and experts simplify. The ability to sum up all of these concepts in the purposeful flow, as Glassman does, in 100 words is nothing short of expert and masterful. But at the same time, it is helpful to unwrap these concise statements and expand on the concepts to better understand and incorporate these ideas into our daily lives. My next guest did exactly that for the members of his gym. Through an email series of 4 to 5 emails, he unpacked the 100 words into an in-depth discussion on the significance of Greg Glassman's statements and how to incorporate them. I invited him onto the podcast to discuss some of the same points. All right. Hey again, everybody. So my next guest started doing CrossFit in 2011, has been coaching CrossFit since 2012. He was a regionals athlete as an individual in 2014 and is currently the head coach at Misfit Gym in Portland. Hunter Wood, thank you for joining the Exploring Fitness Podcast.
Thans for having me.
Did I miss anything? Yeah, did I miss anything in the intro? You have military background too, right?
Yeah, I was a officer in the Marine Corps for 4 years after I did college. Went to a military college, then did my my service obligation after that, and took the full-time job that I have now after separating from the Marine Corps after 4.5 years or so of active duty service. So currently hold the L3 credential. Not that that matters all that much, but good background info.
Well, it matters. It means you know your shit.
Yeah, I like to think so. I was excited to pass that exam a year and a half ago or so.
Cool. Well, with Veterans Day fast approaching, thank you for your service.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the support.
Yeah. So in my first episode of this podcast, I kind of laid the grounds and used some CrossFit definitions, briefly explained the CrossFit methodologies, and included the fitness in 100 words statement in an attempt to define fitness. And you recently, to your gym membership,
Yeah.
created a series of, I think it was like 5 emails, diving very deep into those fitness in 100 words. So I thought it'd be cool to have you on and kind of dig a little bit deeper into that kind of stuff and get your thoughts on those concepts.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack in those 100 words. And I think the impetus for writing that is, I think a lot of people think of CrossFit as just the workout of the day. It's whatever they see on CrossFit.com, or they follow an Instagram page that posts the WOD, or the gym that they go to. It's like, what's the workout of the day? And that's all well and good. That's kind of that's maybe where people's attention goes, but that's not what defines CrossFit. It's not the individual workout that you do. It's I think CrossFit has uniquely positioned itself in the fitness space to not only have an extraordinarily effective program, but a methodology that it sits on top of. And one of the first emails included, I kind of shit on, for a lack of a better term, things like Orange Theory and F45. And I don't actually, like, if you're doing fitness, like, good on you. Please do whatever you need to do to keep yourself active and avoid the chronic disease plague that's crushing the United States. But those brands are really good at getting a lot of people in, getting them into a workout that makes them feel really good because they sweat and they work pretty hard, and they walk out of there feeling good. And that's, again, excellent. But what does that look like in 6 months? What does that look like in a year? And I'd be curious to know what, like, the long-term retention of those types of brands are, especially when they don't necessarily have a methodology for, like, what about F45 is proprietary? What happens if you do F45 for the rest of your life? And to be fair, we don't know what the answer to that is for someone who does CrossFit, but the longer that it's around, we actually just shot a separate podcast, and it was a Q&A. One of the people celebrated, saying, like, I've been doing CrossFit for 12 years. I just hit another PR on my back squat, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, that's awesome. Like, that's the purpose. Does a program like Orange Theory or F45 or whatever other programs that are out there do they have the long-term viability in that sense? And when you look at CrossFit as a whole, with the nutrition, the methodology, the communal aspect to it, like, that is what defines CrossFit. It's not the workout of the day. I think a lot of people lose sight of that, which was kind of the impetus for the email series.
Yeah. And not even, like, do they have the methods, but are they measuring the things consistently that are going to kind of show those changes? But so I want to dive into the 100 words, but before we get into that, the first question I ask all of my guests: what is fitness to you? Without rattling off CrossFit's definition of fitness.
Oh man, yeah, I was gonna say that's the. I mean, I think that, yeah.
Sorry, no cheating.
No cheating. That's a sneaky caveat there. Just don't use the only definition of fitness that makes sense, which CrossFit created. Yeah, I mean, let's say fitness is your ability to go through life without ever facing a physical task that you can't overcome. There should never be something short of, moving a 600-pound couch up a flight of stairs, or something absolutely outlandish that you can't accomplish because of your physical condition. If you can't get up a flight of stairs, because you're not in good enough physical shape to do it, that's a problem. If you can't run and grab your kid who's about to run across the street into oncoming traffic and grab them, that's a problem. If you are deteriorating into your old age to the point where somebody else has to rely on you to do basic human tasks, that's a problem. So that's where I'd lay fitness at everybody's feet.
Oh, I love that. And reading your bio on the Misfit Gym Portland site, I believe that last statement that you made, not having to have somebody help you with daily tasks is part of your reason for why you do CrossFit, and
Yeah, what's
part of your
on
reason
there?
for coaching.
Did I refer to grandparents in that one?
You did.
Yeah,
Grandparents in nursing homes.
yeah, I had two grandmothers, both of my grandmothers who went through the same nursing home at two different like periods in my life, and both for variants of dementia, Alzheimer's. And we're learning a lot more and more about what impacts nutrition and fitness and being physically fit can have on that. Like, people weren't dying of Alzheimer's 100 years ago. Like, a lot of these diseases that we're currently seeing, and you can make the argument that, like, well, human lifespans weren't as long that long ago too, and fair enough. But a lot of the modern ailments that people have, both, these chronic and lifestyle related diseases, they call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes now, because of how similar it is to just the things that correlate to, neurodegenerative diseases and metabolic health. It's like, stop that, everyone, stop it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I love that. But Fitness in 100 Words kind of lays a framework for how to prevent that debility later in life and how to become more physically fit.
yeah,
Right. So do you have the 100 words memorized?
I've got pretty close to it. I'll
All
miss
right.
a few words
All
here
right.
and
Well,
there.
I have it. I have it in front of me. So
I mean,
I'll,
I can I can give it a shot if we're
no,
doing
that's okay.
the quiz
That's okay.
time. But yeah, I've got I'd say 95% plus. Just be a
Yeah.
few words and commas here and there.
So I'll read it off just so that the listeners kind of know where we're headed and have an idea of the framework that we're going to lay out for the rest of this episode. But world-class fitness in 100 words is: eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. Keep intake to levels that will support exercise, but not body fat. Practice and train major lifts: deadlift, clean, squat, presses, clean and jerk, and snatch. Similarly, master the basics of gymnastics: pull-ups, dips, rope climb, push-ups, sit-ups, presses to handstand, pirouettes, flips, splits, and holds. Bike, run, swim, row, etc., hard and fast. 5 or 6 days per week. Mix these elements in as many combinations and patterns as creativity will allow. Routine is the enemy. Keep workouts short and intense. Regularly learn and play new sports. And that was a statement made by Greg Glassman, who was the founder of CrossFit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to dive into each of the emails that you sent out to
Sure.
your membership and just kind of get your thoughts on them and expand on anything if you feel appropriate.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first email kind of set the tone for the remainder of the series. You called it like the primer.
Yeah.
And one of the statements that I really like in it was: CrossFit is a lifestyle that provides a path toward optimal lifelong health and physical functionality. In simple terms, it says this: if you apply the CrossFit methodology in full, you will remain functional into your golden years, void of most or all of the chronic diseases that plague the modern human. It's as simple as that. And that kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. But why do you think simplicity is so crucial in conveying these ideas, especially like in the CrossFit community?
Well, I mean, I think if the end goal is I want to be a functional person who can toss their grandkids and great grandkids around in the backyard, that's kind of the visual that we're thinking. And you can, without any, you're not taking 17 pills every morning to survive. Like, if that's the end goal, it's like fitness has been kind of cannibalized. Combine that with government recommendations for how you should eat food has obliterated the country. And like, you can, like, the number of podcasts I'm listening to where you can attach a timeline. It's like, yep, right around here is when companies started just injecting food with high fructose corn syrup, and like diabetes rates skyrocket and stuff like that. And the answer is, it's like, it's not all that difficult. And part of the impetus for the 100 words is like, yeah, it's 100 words. No, it doesn't incorporate every single little detail, but it gives you the general framework. It's let's eat well. Like, there aren't too many very specific things. It's eat meats and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, no sugar. That's like a fairly specific portion of the nutrition side that gets identified. And then keep intake to levels that support exercise and not body fat. And like, right there, that whole front section with nutrition is like do this. Like, it's not very hard. It's described in like 25 words. If you do this, like, if you were to imagine you were just a blank slate human being, like, who just got dropped into Portland, Maine. It's like, your first stop is the grocery store. Like, buy some meat, vegetables, nuts, seeds, a little bit of fruit, some starch. Don't fucking eat sugar. Do that for the rest of your life in quantities that allow you to sustain energy. And you would be like, you imagine how healthy like that person would be if they knew nothing else about nutrition but that. And it's super simple. We don't need to go down the rabbit hole of like, yeah, I'm going to do the Mediterranean diet, but on Tuesdays, like, I have a quarter of a glass of wine because I read in a Medium article somewhere that like wine is perfectly acceptable. It's like, it's like we've overcomplicated things to the point where people don't know what's right or wrong. We're getting recommendations that are, whether it's government recommendations that are either, well-intentioned but incorrect, or at the very worst, motivated by industry needs and stuff like that. But it's really not that difficult. And again, I say that understanding that a lot of people have relationships with food that have nothing to do with food itself. A lot of like psychological stuff. As a bad experience with food as a child, and what when I was growing up, like the anorexia and bulimia was like the thing, the psychological contagion that was happening. And a lot of like, that sucks, and that messes people up for a really long time, and that changes their relationship with food. Where for me, it's like, yeah, like food, I enjoy eating food, I enjoy cooking, and I use it as fuel, but it's different. And the rest of the 100 words expresses like, these are the things that you can work on inside the gym that are going to make you that capable person who doesn't have to worry about, having someone help them carry groceries up 2 flights of stairs to your apartment, or can run and grab their kid out of the street or something like that, or is able to play with their children in the backyard. So it's like, we have overcomplicated fitness and health to the point where it's like, CrossFit, like, we have the answer. Like, the affiliates have the answer. We have the methodology that it sits on top of. Again, to go back to previous other fitness companies, other spaces, your Orange Theories, your F45s, whatever. It's like, that's not part of it. Like, you go to that gym and you're not going to ask the F45 instructor like, what are my macros? What should I be eating? Like, not because they don't know, and maybe they do because of their own education, but it's not part of the F45 methodology, right? It's like when you do CrossFit, it's like, these are the movements we do. This is the reason we do it. This is what you eat. This is why you eat. And if you do that, then you will be healthy. And oh, by the way, CrossFit has defined what it means to be healthy, defined what it means to be fit. We've defined health. Um, we've established definitions for what all of this means, and it all makes sense. And I think we've just overcomplicated things to the point where it's like, this can be really, really simple if you kind of adopt the methodology and you adopt the lifestyle, so to speak.
So it can be as simple as eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar.
I mean, like, if, again, like, perfect world, clear out every single grocery store. It's always funny to me. The COVID pandemic, people were arguing about whether or not we should be wearing masks and stuff like that. But nobody's like, well, it's like, why are we selling cigarettes to people? Why are we selling alcohol? Why is Coca-Cola the number one purchase thing on food stamps? It's like, I'll tell you what the problem is. Like, send everybody some vitamin D, tell them to get outside and destroy the middle section of the grocery store. Like, get rid of all of those aisles, and like, you're going to save billions and billions of dollars in taxpayer money. And oh, by the way, your life is going to be substantially better. So it really can be that simple without oversimplifying a complicated topic.
Cool. Love that. Could we dive into the keep intakes levels that will support exercise but not body fat a little bit?
Yeah.
How do you approach that with an athlete?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is, like, what is the athlete's goals? And then, like, there is a bit of, if I'm working with an athlete, like, I am also looking at them physically. It's like, okay, I can tell this athlete physically needs to lose body fat, or maybe they have a specific goal of they're actually very lean and they want to increase muscle mass, less common than somebody who wants to lose weight and specifically body fat. The intake levels thing, anytime that I give somebody a caloric, like a calorie recommendation, and therefore the macronutrients that create that calorie total, I honestly, I use like an online calorie calculator that bases off their age, their height, their current weight. And then I'll take it a step further by saying, like, well, what weight do you want to get down to? If there's a massive gap, like I want to lose 100 pounds. Okay, I'm not going to give that person the calorie number to get them to 100 pounds as fast as possible. We're going to give them the calorie number that makes them lose 15 pounds, and then we'll do it again till they lose 15 more pounds and stuff like that. But it'll just start with a very, very kind of generic baseline number of calories. Through my experience, I'll be able to say, like, that might be a little bit high, or no, that's a little low, or this person has a high basal metabolic rate to begin with, so we'll tinker a little bit there. But ultimately, I don't find that it matters too much, because one, people, like, close enough is close enough when it comes to calories for the most part, because, like, people aren't exactly, you know, tracking, like, to the single calorie what they're eating. It doesn't make sense to go that deep into the weeds. Like, here's a baseline number. I know this is probably going to work. Here are the macros that are associated to get you to that number. Let's start here. And I would also say the first step in that process is getting that person to track what they eat for an entire week. MyFitnessPal I find to be the easiest app. That's also the only one I've used, so that's probably why I find it the easiest. But whatever, do you use something to track literally every single thing that you put in your body for fuel, and that just establishes our baseline. It's like, hey, don't lie about it. Don't bullshit it. Don't change the way that you're going to eat for this week. Like, all it is just like, what did you put in your body the last week? And then at least we have a baseline. So they have an idea of, like, hey, this is what you're doing now. This is what I'm going to have you do. Do you see the difference here? Like, oh, okay. So we can start to see, like, where we're at, where we're headed. And then once the person, like, actually kind of starts along that path, then we can just tinker with numbers further from there. But Yeah, as far as the intake thing goes, like it's very kind of rudimentary as far as like let's just get a calorie number. From there, I'll break out the macronutrient, carbs, protein, fat percentage, and I usually just start with the CrossFit methodology, which they still go by the zone diet, which is 40 30 30, 40% of calories from carbs, 30% fat and protein, and then we'll tinker from there.
Yeah, that the tracking piece is so important. Like, I think a lot of times people don't realize like exactly how much they're eating, or maybe even like what they're eating until they start writing it down on paper.
Yeah. And like you might have even had this experience too. You ask somebody the generic question, so how's your nutrition? How's your diet? And
It's pretty
like,
good. It's pretty good, I think.
It's pretty good, I think. Exactly. Like
Yeah.
every single time. It's like fantastic.
Yeah. And then you start diving into it a little bit more, and then they're finally like, well, I guess I could do a little bit better.
Yeah.
But
and a lot of it is education too. It's like there are a lot of people who don't know what a carbohydrate is. Like what's peanut butter? It's protein. It's like, well, there's protein in peanut butter, but
there's
like
a lot of fat in it.
There's a lot of fat in peanut butter, and like a lot of it comes down to education. And it's like how many people listening to this right now got an education in like high school or middle school about like what to eat, what are macronutrients, what are calories, how many calories are in a gram of protein or whatever, that sort of thing. Like maybe learn that as an adult in a college course, or if you went down that professional path, but otherwise like a lot of people just don't know.
Yeah, it's like a foreign language almost.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Let's continue on down through some more of the 100 words. The next section that you covered in the following email was practice and train the major lifts: deadlift, clean, squat, presses, clean and jerk, and snatch. Similarly, master the basics of gymnastics: pull-ups, dips, rope climb, push-ups, sit-ups, presses, the handstand, pirouettes, flips, splits, and holds, bike, runs, swims, row, etc., hard and fast. So the first piece that you break down is kind of the practice and train. Can you kind of talk about the difference between those two, practice and training?
Yeah. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the way that I broke this down, and this is how I communicate to athletes, like this whole email was on like kind of the training side. So the first email was like 100 words. It's like, how do I fuel myself for life? Where gym, even if you're not going to a gym, like we can still apply this. Like if you don't work out and you do those first 50 words, whatever, for nutrition, like you're going to be setting yourself up for success. When it comes to coming into the gym and the way that we train, we have functional movements, which which CrossFit has defined. They have to meet a certain criteria to be determined as functional movements. It's not just like, is this functional in the sense that like, do I go deadlift? It's like, well, yep, sure, you pick things up off the ground, so you deadlift, so deadlifting is functional. We could argue about the snatch, which is used in 100 words. Like, I don't know how many people are squat snatching their groceries off the ground, but like, that's not as much the point. The point here was that all of the lifts that are alluded to have the capacity to create significant changes at both like at the cellular level. We call that in CrossFit, they have the potential for high neuroendocrine adaptation. We can literally change the cellular, like our cellular mapping, by lifting really heavy, doing something with a complex lift like a snatch or a clean or even a back squat for certain population. Like those require the recruitment and the coordination of a lot of different body parts and joints all working together. The practice and train thing is where we start to kind of bridge the gap between like, am I technically proficient enough in this lift or gymnastics movement in order to get adaptation out of it? So an example would be somebody who could do, let's see, say like they could do like 3 kipping pull-ups. They can't do any strict pull-ups, but they can hop up, and they've figured out how to work their way around using their hips, and they can do kipping pull-ups. And it's like we have kind of skipped over the practice and the basics here in an effort to train a movement with the goal of kind of getting better at kipping pull-ups. If we can't do an air squat, then we're not really going to be able to utilize the back squat. If we haven't done enough practice to master an air squat, we are not going to be able to use a back squat to train strength. So that's kind of how I think about it. The practice side is where like we need to make a brain body connection here. We need to coordinate all of these things. Anybody who's ever played a sport and is learning how to do something, swing a golf club, swing a baseball bat, spike a volleyball, whatever. You can think of any sport and a skill that requires like really, really important timing. There's a sequence to how these things work. It's the exact same thing with the movements, basically all the movements that we do in CrossFit. There is a right way and a wrong way to do things. Practicing is teaching your body the right way to do things under a low intensity environment. So I'm going to get you really, really good at air squatting, and maybe you do 50 air squats in the class and they were all beautiful, and that's perfect. We can then go and take those mechanics and let's put a barbell on your back and add some weight. And now we can start to train. We can start to use the fact that we know how to do the movement, and now we can get better at it, and we can actually achieve a training stimulus out of it. Once somebody has the coordination to do a snatch, again, not so much about the functionality of a snatch, but there's a lot of functionality about taking something from the ground and then using hip extension, which is like one of the main markers of longevity and health. Like you don't see not many people in a nursing home have fully functioning hips, right? So those people can't achieve full hip extension. If we can do that with an external load and a snatch because of how far that bar has to travel, we need to actually extend our hips rapidly. That has a high level of functionality to it and a longevity element to it as well. So we practice things to get good at to kind of establish that brain body connection. The muscle memory is another way to think about it. We can then use movements to actually train. Okay. Once I have the ability to do strict pull-ups, I can then do a lot of strict pull-ups, and I can get better pulling strength. I can develop upper back muscles. I can improve my grip strength. We can do all kinds of things. Once we know how to do the movement, we can then train it in such a way that creates adaptation in your body.
Got it. So the practice to training continuum kind of follows like that mechanics, consistency,
exactly,
intensity that we hear so much about in class.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the same thing with the going down to like the master the basics of gymnastics. You've probably seen it. A lot of people, CrossFit for the longest time was the whipping boy for like, those aren't real pull-ups. Like as somebody's doing a butterfly pull-up and they snap a pull-up bar off at a Globo gym. It's like, we're missing the mark here. Anyway, the point is like we need to master the basics with the mechanics, consistency, intensity doctrine. That's all we're saying that is, right? It's like the mechanics side is like, prove to me that you can do one phenomenal air squat. Okay, excellent. Prove to me for gymnastics that you can achieve a hollow body position and then an arch position. And can you go back and forth like that? Can you do a kip swing correctly that shows that we can go from those two positions? Like, so we've got the mechanics. We know how to do things correctly. The consistency is like, does your 100th air squat in Murph look like your first air squat? Does your 200th, does your 300th? Because at some point, everybody breaks down a little bit, and that's kind of where we have to toe the line with folks who are, maybe the beginner intermediate level athletes. It's like, damn, I got my first muscle up, so I must be able to do like 12 of them in a workout. It's like, well, like we got the mechanics down. We don't quite have the consistency, so let's not try to apply intensity just yet. But hey, you can air squat. You prove that you can do a lot of air squats. You prove that you can actually back squat a respectable amount of weight. So we've established mechanics, we've established some level of consistency, and then that's the point at which we can say, like, all right, well, how fast can you do Fran? Can you do, a front squat to a push press? Can you do it without mechanics seriously degrading to the point where injury becomes a concern? And therefore, that's where the intensity side of the equation is where we get the adaptation and the results and stuff like that. And we can think about that in a conditioning perspective, like going really fast. And then we can think about it from a lifting perspective of going really heavy. Those are kind of our two metrics for intensity, right? Loading or speed or time.
Yeah. And that intensity is going to be relative to the individual, correct?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I guess, like, how do you, whenever you coach, kind of convey like the appropriate stimulus, like, for the class, so that different athletes of different ability levels are all kind of living where they're supposed to in a workout?
Yeah, I mean, like, more often than not, a workout's going to have an athlete comes in and they see the workout and it's like, well, what's the crux of this workout for me? What's like, yep, it's the barbell weight. Like, that's just too much for me. It's like, okay, well, like, why is it too much? Can you not do it one time? Can you not do it at all? Can you do it a few times, but you know that it's going to get heavy, and like when you're breathing hard, it's going to your technique's going to fail you, so you're at risk for injury? Or is it like, hey, I actually just am too inexperienced to, I guess, get a good workout with, for lack of a better term. Like, I'm actually going to need to modify this movement a little bit to something that is doable for that level athlete. So to go back to the intensity being relative thing, it's like when we program, at least at our gym, and this is how, for the most part, CrossFit teaches coaches to program, is program for the best, scale for the rest. And that's, and that is, again, that's also relative to your community. Like, the workout that I programmed, I'm not programming for Tia Toomey or Matt Frazier best. I'm programming for, like, well, what's the, knowing my community, what is a reasonable workout for our fittest athletes if they do this as prescribed and achieve the desired stimulus. Like, what is this going to do? And then we try to slot other athletes either by saying, like, no, actually, like, today you're qualified to do this workout as prescribed. Good luck to you, soldier. Or it's like, nope, we're going to modify this by reducing weight. In some instances, we'll reduce reps so that athletes have, fewer reps to worry about their mechanics breaking down. And then it's also, having that one-on-one conversation with the new athlete. Like, as a coach, it's not like you're just going to have 30 athletes of whom their skill level is completely unknown to you. I'll look at a class roster and be like, yep, that person just finished beginners last week, so I'm going to actually, like, shaved, you're going to do 3 rounds instead of 4, because I know, one, it's going to take you longer because you're going to move slower. And I'm also going to tell you, like, hey, I just want you to move really, really well for this 4 rounds. You give people the confidence, you teach them, when they move really well, you are establishing a baseline of movement quality that as they get fitter, they will hold on to, but you can encourage them to go faster. And that's where the mechanics, consistency, intensity, and then there's also the concept of threshold training that CrossFit talks about, where it's like, the most effective program is one that is both effective and safe. If I tell you to do a 1 rep max back squat every single day until your 1 rep max back squat goes up, like, eventually your back squat's probably going to go up. Whether it happens before your knees snap or after is to be determined, but that's not a viable long-term program. And neither is, like, hey, you're going to do 20 air squats. Your workout's going to be 20 air squats every day for a month, and then it's going to be 30 for a month, and then it's going to be 40 for a month. It's like, that's really safe, but it's probably not going to fucking do anything. So those are extreme examples, but in the workout, that's what we're thinking. It's like, is this athlete moving safe enough that, like, no major issues are going to arise, even if it's slightly less than perfect? Or is this athlete like kind of entering the danger zone as far as like, hey, your back is rounded beyond what is acceptable for the speed at which you're moving, and it's like, we need to pull some weight off, we need to stop and reset, I need you to slow down, something like that. So the intensity being relative is how we get the and you combine that with the idea of threshold training is how we keep the athletes safe so that they can keep coming back every day to see the progress, so then come back every day. It's a big positive feedback loop.
Cool. And not every day, but 5 or 6 days per week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So let's start diving into that piece. So the next section of the 100 words is 5 or 6 days per week. Mix these elements in as many combinations and patterns as creativity will allow. So the 5 or 6 days per week piece, like, why is that key in terms of getting into the gym that many days?
Yeah, I think so. I kind of broke it down. Like, again, if you're somebody, maybe you're listening to this and thinking about getting into a gym or whatever, like, I'll, make no qualms about it. 1 day per week is infinitely better than 0 days per week. And 2 days per week is 100% better than 1 day per week. But there is a line at which, and especially if we're going to be specifically training at such a low frequency like that and expect to have like long-term effects, like, you have to be exceptionally good with your nutrition. We need to be getting outside, taking enough like steps throughout the day, what we'd call like non-exercise movement, in order to like, be the healthiest version of yourself. 3 days per week, that's where we're like, okay, like, hey, we're getting into it. And like, that's kind of the bridge where it's like, hey, if you're coming 3 days a week, you might as well come 4 or 5 days a week. I think to me, in my opinion, once we hit 4 days per week, 4 or more days, that 4 to 6 days per week, that's the sweet spot for like long-term change, long-term progress, and also habit creation. Cause that's a huge part of the fitness equation too. It's like a lot of folks can get motivated for a month. Like the New Year's resolution, January is jam-packed, February 1st, it's like 20% of the people that were here because their membership expired and they didn't want to renew. The 5 to 6 days a week is CrossFit.com has forever basically done 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day. I think it's 3 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off.
I think that's right.
Yeah. And they like it essentially, the reasoning is to optimize recovery with intensity. Because we can also like CrossFit, for one reason or another, also has a propensity to get people not only like into the gym, but into the gym maybe more than they need to, for at least for like the purposes of long-term health and longevity. 5 to 6 days, I think that's where like you can maximize intensity and recovery. So the recommendation of 3 days of work, usually by that third day, people are starting to, soreness is carried over from the previous couple days. Your nervous system's maybe a little bit run down. Maybe your adrenals are just a little bit shot. That's when it's like, yeah, I can do that weight, or I can do all those reps. And it's like, that's the time when people get hurt. It's like, I come in, I probably could use a rest day, but I really like that workout, or I just want to get into the gym because I want to sweat and feel good. And like, that's when we start to go 4 or 5 days in a row, or we're creeping up on 6 or 7 days a week. It's like, that's just not sustainable for months or years on end, which is the goal, right? The goal is to have a program that is sustainable for a very, very long period of time, not like I'm going to hammer myself in the face for the next 30 days straight. And then like, again, you get injured, you get burnt out, you lose motivation. And now we've not only like, we're not only out of the gym, but we're not motivated to go to the gym, or worse, we're hurt.
Right.
So
it's not a 30-day challenge. It's like a 30-year
exactly. And again, that's
plan. Yeah.
That's to me what separates CrossFit from other programs. It's like, if we do this, it's that slow incremental growth. Another Glassman, I think Glassman said, the low trajectory to a distant horizon. It's not like I'm not trying to get as fit as possible in the next 30 days. I'm trying to get a little bit fitter over the next 6 months, and then a little bit fitter than that over the next 6 months, and then a little bit fitter than that over the next year. And like, as long as we continue to move that needle in the right direction and push our fitness to the right, like, it doesn't, nothing else matters. Like, it doesn't, again, assuming your goal is just general health and wellness, like, there's no rush. There's certainly ways that we can expedite your progress in certain areas, but again, that's not the point. It's like, let's move really well. Let's learn how to do all of these things correctly. And then as they because you are consistent enough 4 to 5, 6 days a week, those things are going to pop back up often enough where you can actually see progress. Like, I could only back squat 200 pounds last time I did this, and now I did 210 pounds. I could only do 5 pull-ups, and now I can do 8 pull-ups. And it's like that little incremental growth is what we're after. We just need to expand the time horizon on which we're kind of evaluating those things.
Yeah. And I like the 5 or 6 days per week doesn't explicitly talk about those rest days, but it's obviously implied in there. Like,
yeah, and the last sentence, the regularly learn and play new sports, is, I think, is another kind of missing element. We can get there when we get there, but it's absolutely, it's like, hey, why don't you get out, like, go for a long walk? Like, that's part of fitness. Make that your rest day. There are lots of different ways to be active on rest days without coming in and doing a 21-15-9 or a heavy squat session.
Right. Active recovery.
For sure.
Perfect. Mix these elements in as many combinations and patterns as creativity will allow. Routine is the enemy.
Yeah. That's the one where we're getting into the weeds a little bit on the CrossFit, knowing kind of, is CrossFit random? Is it, what is the routine is the enemy? Like, we're never going to do the same thing twice. I think the overall intention here is that, like, one of the coolest things Glassman said is, like, he was talking about the idea of lifting heavy weight with a high heart rate. So, like, if we think about traditional strength and conditioning, it's like you do your strength and then you do your cardio. Those two things are separate. They don't get combined. And the idea, in, like, he said something along the lines of, like, CrossFit is blind to the distinction because nature is blind to the distinction. Like, nature doesn't give a fuck if you have to try to lift, push a dead vehicle out of the road and your heart rate's at 160 because you're stressed as shit. Or, like, that's kind of a silly example, but the idea being here is that, like nature is random and unpredictable. Like, you don't know what life is going to throw at you from a physical capacity requirement perspective. So, like, why would your training be extraordinarily predictable and repetitive? When it comes to actually mixing as many elements and combinations as creativity will allow, like, we have certain, like, as a coach and as a programmer, there's a lot more to it than just, like, yep, we haven't done that combination of things before. Let's throw a clock for 20 minutes and let them rip. But it's more about the broad and general concept that, like, I want you to be good at a lot of different things. When you get good at weird things, other things that you didn't think were going to get better tend to get better. It's like, why, like, how come burpees just got easier as my cardio, as my cardiovascular fitness improved? Why did Fran get easier when my back squat got better? Like, all of these things are interrelated, and that's the broad concept of general physical preparedness. Like, the thing that you are most deficient in, if you can make that better, you can, a rising tide kind of lifts all ships, is the kind of concept here. So CrossFit is not random. I can't speak for every program because there's certainly bad CrossFit programs out there, but again, the idea being that, like, there is kind of a randomness to life and the physical requirements outside the gym, and therefore like you should be ready for that. And we can also just use different movements to achieve a different stimulus, to train a specific energy system, to elicit a certain adaptation that we're looking for. As many combinations as creativity will allow. That's where kind of the art and the science match up, and hopefully you get a good program out of it.
Got it. So you guys at Misfit don't use straight up hopper model pulling ping pong
Yeah.
balls?
I got 70 ping pong balls in the back here. That's what I'm doing for the next phase. I'm just thrusters,
pulling
back
it
squat.
random.
Yep. 1 rep max thruster, 1 rep max back squat, deadlift, all in the same day. That's what the ping pong balls said. No, that is not how we do that.
So you briefly mentioned in that last little explanation about the energy systems.
Yeah.
Which is what your like part number 4 of the email series kind of started diving into. So can you kind of like break down the role of intensity and those 3 energy systems? And I guess first, like touch on what the 3 energy systems are and why it's important to hit all 3.
Can I answer what it? Can I? Yeah. I'll get to that. Intensity is just for people listening. Like again, CrossFit, exceptional job of defining things. Intensity and power output are effectively the same thing, and this is actually like mechanical power output. So it is work divided by time, or force times distance divided by time. If you lift a heavier weight, or if you move it a longer distance and you do it faster, your power output increases, and therefore your fitness increases, which is what we're after with CrossFit. Our body operates off of 3 energy systems that are pretty much always like aside from specific instances, like currently us just sitting here, we're almost exclusively using our oxidative pathway. We're powered by oxygen. If I stand up really quickly, I will briefly tap into my phosphocreatine pathway, which is quick energy for bouts of like up to 10 seconds. And then there's a middle energy system. So we've got on the maximal effort being our phosphocreatine ATP pathway. ATP is the kind of if you remember from middle school biology, ATP is the currency of the cell. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, sort of thing. And that is readily available for like immediately for really, really high power output activities, but like a souped up sports car, like you only want to drive in first gear and accelerate as fast as possible for a short period of time before we got to change gears. So it's really good for a really short period of explosive exercise. It also requires a lot of recovery to repeat those efforts.
So this is like a short sprint or like a 1 rep max snatch or something like that.
Absolutely. Yep. Something super explosive, super powerful. It's probably not going to make you breathe hard. It's probably not going to make your muscles burn very much, but it is going to be require a lot of effort. The next one, the glycolytic pathway, lactate threshold pathway, depending on where you read, that's where we're getting effort and energy from anywhere from like, beyond that 10-second mark up to like 2.5 minutes or so. Again, kind of depends on what book you're reading, but it's that 400-meter run, 800-meter run. It's the really shitty time domain. It's like if you've ever felt, the leg burn, someone will tell you like the lactic acid. That's not what it is, but for the listener, like that's effectively what it is. That extreme leg burn, maybe your lungs are on fire, like that sort of thing. It's a really, really difficult time domain to train just because of how uncomfortable it is. We use muscle glycogen or sugar to power that pathway. It doesn't allow for quite as high of an output as the phosphocreatine pathway, but it does allow for a longer effort at that level before it starts to taper off, and we need some help. So, and then the last one is that oxidative pathway where we're using oxygen or stored fat, or oxygen is going to break that fat down into usable energy. It's slow. It takes a long time for that process to occur to convert fat into energy, but it is the most sustainable one that we can do. So you can, most of us listening can probably walk for, at least I don't know. I'd like to think folks could walk for an hour on end. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but beyond that 2.5 minute range, the more sustained effort is where our oxidative pathway kicks in. And all three of those systems are going to work in some capacity, regardless of what you're doing. It's just the degree of which energy system is contributing more at a given time.
So I guess
I don't remember the first part of that question. It was that was just the explanation of,
that was the
what
explanation
those energy
of the three.
systems are.
So now that we kind of understand the three different ones, like how does that fit into the role of intensity and like training in CrossFit, I guess?
Yeah. So in CrossFit, like fitness, we'll go to the actual definition of fitness for CrossFit. Fitness is increased work capacity across broad time and modal domains. So increased work capacity is exactly what it sounds like, the ability to do mechanical work, move a load a given distance. The quicker you do it, the higher the power output, the greater the fitness. Where was I? Fitness, increased work capacity across broad time. So lots of different time domains. I want you to be just as proficient from, in a 1 minute max effort thing as I want you to also be able to run a 5K in a respectable amount of time. And that's kind of where the energy systems come in. Energy systems are more, in kind of, for me, I think of them more as like a time-based thing. So if I'm going to have an athlete working out for like, if I'm going to program a workout that's going to situate most people in like a 2 to 5 minute time domain, like the workout needs to allow for an athlete to go really, really hard. Because if that's the only thing an athlete's going to do in a class, which is normal, reasonable, and like perfectly acceptable, but the workout needs to be written to accommodate like a very aggressive effort. And then we're kind of also thinking about it in terms of energy systems when we get somebody, whether it's on a machine or in a CrossFit workout in general. So we try to mix things up as far as like time domain of workouts. We have short workouts, which we internally kind of define as under 8 minutes. That's short in CrossFit terms. And then we do have days where it's like, you're going to sprint on a bike as hard as you can for 10 seconds and you're going to do it 10 times. And that is effectively like, hey, we're training kind of that phosphocreatine energy system. So I want you to get really good there. If that happens in that week, so let's say we do 10-second sprints on the bike, odds are at some point in that week, you're also going to be asked to do 20 minutes of, a circuit of burpees and maybe deadlifts and rowing or something like that, where what in order to get the best score or in order to perform the best, you need to approach that with a much more sustained effort. You're not going to approach the 20-minute workout with the same level of intensity as you do the 10-second bike sprint. And that kind of goes back to the both the energy systems thing and the intensity being not only relative to the individual, but also relative to the task at hand. Like, again, you don't sprint the first 400 meters of a 5K unless you have a death wish. You shouldn't. Yeah, you can go for it. Let me know when you do. I'm going to come watch. But yeah, the intent, like, for a 5K, it's like, I want the maximum intensity that you can sustain for what is going to end up being, 18 to 25 minutes. So it's like, that is not the same energy level as I want you to go as hard as you can sustain for 10 seconds, which for most people is like, you can go as hard as you want for 10 seconds and you'll be able to achieve that. So that's kind of where the intensity being relative thing matters. And then as far as the energy systems go, it's like the goal again, with CrossFit is I want you to be able to outrun the lifter and outlift the runner. So I want you to be proficient in all three of those metabolic pathways. If you're a football player, odds are you're extremely powerful, but you lack the endurance. Like, I'm not going to expect an NFL player to run a highly respectable 5K time. They might be athletic enough to do it, but we get the point. And the same thing, like if you're a marathoner, like excellent, but you can't deadlift your body weight, like that's a disparity in fitness that CrossFit kind of seeks to address. I want you to be pretty good at a whole shitload of things, not extraordinarily good at a very small number of things.
Specialize and not specializing.
Exactly. Yeah. Our specialty is not specializing.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So regularly learn and play new sports kind of fits in with that, and like not specializing, but kind of playing around and exploring new movement. Can you kind of like just expand on that briefly and maybe give an example?
Yeah, I think this is like, as you kind of think back to your childhood, like for the most part, you probably weren't in a gym doing thrusters and pull-ups. Like you're on a playground, you're swinging on monkey bars, you're at recess. Like I played kickball all the time. It was dodgeball. It was kickball. It was some sort of sport. It wasn't, we're not going to go exercise. CrossFit achieves that goal with the inside the gym stuff. But again, with the world-class fitness in 100 words being kind of like the most succinct roadmap to long-term health and fitness is like, we want you to take the fitness that you've gained and bring it outside the gym, whether that's throwing a frisbee with friends on the beach or playing spike ball or something like that. Or maybe you do take up your fitness has enabled you now to adopt a hobby that you didn't think you could do. I got an email got a thank you note from a member whose 4-year gym-iversary. Heather's getting all kinds of shout outs today. Talked about her on the podcast earlier, but she was like, thanks to all the fitness, like I've been able to do adventure races. I've been able to do things that I didn't think that I was able to do before that had, she's not doing thrusters on her 24-hour, bike race, but all of the fitness and all of the lessons that she gained in the gym maybe enabled her, gave her the confidence that she could go out and perform in a task like that or in a thing like that. So it's more about, hey, let's like remember that the fitness is not confined to the four walls of the gym, nor is that the point of CrossFit. Like we want you to be able to use your fitness outside the gym. And then just like the idea of learning and playing a new sport is again, like I'll give you I'm a good example for that. I took up golf like 2 years ago. I think
I was wondering if you were,
yeah. I mean, but it's the easiest thing for me. It's like, okay, so I did do competitive CrossFit a very long time ago. That doesn't really interest me anymore. And I do CrossFit for the health and kind of longevity benefits, but also like for me personally, I was missing a little bit of like there was a competitive side of me that I hadn't really explored in a long time. When I got introduced to golf, it was very much like, oh man, this is the perfect combination of a physically demanding sport. I'm physically demanding, like I get it. But there is like the golf swing itself. To me, it's like I made the argument that the 3 most difficult things to do in all of sports is squat snatch, swing a golf club, like hit a golf ball consistently straight, and hit a baseball, hit a fastball in the major league. And I think like all 3 of those things, it's like a high degree of timing, coordination, athleticism. Say what you want about the athletic ability of a professional golfer, but the idea there was like, okay, I'm going to take the concepts that I've learned in the gym, the idea of core to extremity, right? So I use my hips before I throw my arms with the golf club. Like, any good golf teacher will tell you don't use your arms before your hips. But it's just this concept of using your fitness outside the gym. And also say the other thing, like if there's one knock on CrossFit, it's that we don't often do a lot of, you know, it's a very, very single plane sort of sport. We spend most of our time in the frontal plane, moving up and down, staying stationary, moving forward in a single direction. There's not so much change of direction. And you probably see that often as a physical therapist, people getting hurt doing, you know, like I rolled an ankle playing pickup basketball. I tore my ACL playing pickleball. It's like these change of direction, these super aggressive changes of direction stuff. Rotational stuff doesn't often get mixed into CrossFit, and that's probably a deficiency that could be addressed with like simple stuff like doing it in the warm up or a cool down, or you know, doing some rotation and counter rotation stuff for like overall health. But again, the point here is that you're like going into the gym, you're learning how to move your body as a unit, as one single unit, rather than training your biceps, right? It's like, okay, we want to get big biceps, let's do some bicep curls. But if we want to have a body that like works as a single unit and works, you know, it kind of everything complements each other. Like we also want to take our fitness outside the gym and express it in such a way that is, you know, we're learning and playing new sports and games and stuff like that, kind of almost taking it back to playground days, like be a kid again, get outside and play.
I love that. And I love how a lot of the concepts that we've already talked about kind of incorporate into the playing new sports too, like the mechanics, consistency, intensity side. And like golf's a great example. Like if you don't have solid mechanics, you're not going to be able to hit the ball consistently. And then as soon as you start hitting the ball consistently, I don't know about you, but as soon as I start adding intensity and trying to hit the ball harder, then my consistency goes back to shit.
Yeah.
So no, it's like,
yeah, there's so many parallels to it. And I think for me too, like the coach brain learning a new sport, I kind of said to myself, I was like, okay, I think I really want to try to get good at this, but I'm going to like, what would I say to beginner CrossFitter hunter? It's like, learn how to do the basics like extremely well, take your time with it so that you are establishing like correct motor patterns. It's so difficult. You've seen it. You've probably experienced it as a CrossFitter too. Like it's really, really fucking hard to reteach your body something, especially when it's been doing it a certain way for years and years. And like, I'll say that about some of my CrossFit, like my Olympic lifts, like I know where my deficiencies are, but man, it is really, really difficult to reteach myself how to do something, having done it for a really long time. If we can, you know, let's say you do something like what I did, you want to pick up a new sport. It's like, well, let's think like, what did CrossFit teach me? It taught me learn the proper mechanics, learn the foundations for like what makes a mechanically sound golf swing or, you know, whatever sport you're playing. Gradually introduce a little bit more, like prove that you can hit the golf ball once, then prove that you can do it 3 times in a row, then 5 times in a row. And then, you know, only once you have been able to do that, do we start thinking about like, all right, well, maybe I can just swing this club harder and hit the ball farther. It's like, I don't know, like, yep, maybe we do that a little bit, but let's master the consistency first. Let's make sure our mechanics are good. We have the consistency, then we can add intensity, and you can really apply that to learning I would say anything, let alone a physical task. But yeah, it's pretty wild. I think I could figure out a way to track any CrossFitter's question back to the world-class fitness in 100 words and be like, we talked about that. It's just right here. It's right here in word number 62.
That's great. And as you wrapped up your email series, there's a phrase or a little paragraph here. It says, in mathematics, the term elegant is used to describe an equation that solves a problem in the simplest and most efficacious manner. World-class fitness in 100 words is just that, an elegant description of exactly how to approach your health and fitness for life. So I think we kind of like wrapped it up beautifully there. You can use those 100 words in almost any aspect of life.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I did stole a lot from Glassman, but the term elegant, I mean, he didn't obviously invent that, but that's the mathematical definition. It's usually used in like physics or math, like an extraordinarily complex problem that can be solved by a very, force equals mass times acceleration, Newton's law of gravitation, like an extraordinarily difficult problem succinct into one equation that is effective but extraordinarily simple. And I think that like the 100 words of fitness, again, like you can unpack it as deeply as we just did in a hour-long podcast, or you can look at it kind of at face value and be like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to eat, this is what I'm supposed to do for exercise, this is how often I'm supposed to do it, keep workouts short and intense, play some new sports here and there. Like if you do all of those things, like odds are the other thing, because people love to be like, well, what about sleep? Well, what about your mental health? And it's like, it's kind of baked into the cake. Like if you're doing all of those things, but you're not sleeping well, it's like, I don't know that you are doing all those things. It's like, if you're doing all those things and you're going to CrossFit class, like hopefully you're sleeping well. Like if the nutrition is there and you're not eating like a crazy person, like the sleep is going to be there. And I think all of those things kind of get baked in. So you can nitpick at it, but I think it's a pretty succinct explanation and operating manual for your physical well-being.
It's elegant.
It is.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, hey, thank you for coming on. Any parting words, or where our listeners can find out more about this stuff? Or do you have links to that email series?
No, I don't. I can, if anybody, anybody who's listening, you can email me, hunter@misfitathletics.com. I'm happy to forward those to you, or Dan, you're obviously welcome to share those with anybody who asks, if you get anybody who does. Yeah. And I mean, I'll take the opportunity to promote Misfit Gym Portland. Like that's what we do here. We do CrossFit. That was one of the ending things, because that's kind of a tagline that I've had in the gym, more of a reminder for people that, as I'm about to press 3, 2, 1, go on the remote, it's like, hey, this is a reminder. This workout's for time. Or like, I want you to try hard. Let's, like, we do CrossFit here. We do CrossFit at Misfit Gym Portland. So if you're interested, we'd love to talk. You can email me, email info@misfitgymportland to learn a little bit more. But I promise, if you're worried about getting started in CrossFit, you are not the least physically qualified person that I've seen. And quite honestly, the less physically qualified you think you are, the more motivation you should have, and the more we can help. So whether you're, trying to make varsity as a high school athlete, whether you're a collegiate athlete trying to get performance, or you're like, I haven't worked out in 30 years, like, and I'm now deciding that I need to get my health and wellness together. Like, I promise we've worked with someone like you before. So those will be my parting words for listeners if you're in the Portland, Maine area.
Perfect. Hunter, really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dan.